following is a Goulash Media production. goulashmedia.net. Hello and welcome to the first ever public episode of Downer Church, which is a spin-off to our main show, The System is Down podcast, which is a place for uncomfortable conversations about things like conspiracies, politics, and religion. Now, Downer Church is something completely different and new. It is open, civil conversations about all things in theology. And when I say open, I mean in the most literal sense. It is open to any topic, any thought, any doubt, and anybody of any faith, any background, any belief, any whatever who wants to join, whether you're Christian, atheist, agnostic, Muslim, Jew, Hindu, doesn't matter. You're all certainly welcome to join the conversation, be on the show, and give your opinions as long as everything is civil and respectful. My goal for this is to kind of just redefine the word church. I mean, a lot of people, when they hear the term, they think of elderly blue hair sitting in an old building listening to some guy give his interpretation of what he thinks God is. And that's not what this is. We're here to just be humans with humans and share our stories, share life together, share our thoughts, our backgrounds, and just be open and honest, which is something that I think is grossly lacking in the typical structures and our typical ideas of church. We've been having these conversations weekly, every Monday, for the last, I'd say, about a month or so. And so far, it's just been phenomenal. It's very laid back and casual and real and raw. And, well, we don't have agendas or topics or anything set in structure or anything like that. It's basically just an open forum where we talk about life and talk about whatever comes up. So it's not always pretty, but if you like what you hear and you want to be a part of the conversation, just go to tsidpod.com/church to find out how you can join the next conversation. We typically do them on Monday nights at 8 p.m. Central, so go check that out. Once again, that's tsidpod.com/church. And once again, these conversations are completely unscripted, unedited, unfiltered. They're not sexy. They're sometimes offensive, but you know, just like life, it's also raw and real and beautiful. So, enjoy.
So you don't believe in something watching us, something keeping all of this going?
I'm not sure there's no God, but I don't know. The most important revolution in human history, more important than agriculture, more important than writing, is the scientific revolution came down to 3 words. I don't know. And no institution, no church, no king, no power structure had ever said in history, I don't know.
Here we are, and we have 1 new person and 5 people who have been here before. Ben, my brother Ben, how's it going?
Pretty good.
Cool.
I'm having some weird connection issues, so I was trying to see how I could do this on my computer.
It's all good. Well, you can tinker with that and cut out if you need to.
Don't know how to... Okay, so why can I not find Skype on my computer? That's weird.
On your MacBook?
The government!
Should be
Is
able
it
to...
in the App Store?
Should be, yeah.
Because it ain't.
That's where I got it.
Skype chat viewer?
Actually, you might have to go to skype.com.
That's what I was going to say.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I'll tinker with that. But yeah, I'm doing pretty well.
Okay, cool.
I washed my hair so I would, because I knew it was going to be on camera.
It's all right. Only we can see you, and we are not judgmental. Well, at least I'm not. But, yeah, so you being new, just so you know, this is just open discussion about whatever comes up, and we've got people here that believe all sorts of different things, and whatever you feel like saying, you're totally welcome to. Do you have, as the new guy, do you have any topics or stories or anything that you'd like to share to kick things off? You don't have to, but you're welcome to.
I've kind of been thinking or trying to think of things, and I can't necessarily say there's anything
all right.
I would want to kick anything off with.
Sure.
I don't think. I always talk too much anyway, so...
It's all right.
kind of follow along.
That's why I'm glad you're here. We need people who talk more. So it probably won't make it into the episode, but before we actually started recording, Forrest's computer was playing stuff about the Big Bang Theory in the background, and we could not figure out where in the world it was coming from. So let's start with that. I suppose the good Lord has given us a topic. Big Bang Theory. Who wants to start? Who's got thoughts? Believe it?
God
Don't believe
wants
it?
to start. Creation.
Oh, grown or foul. Well, Jack, what are you...
What about the fact that some people believe that God created the earth technically by basically speaking the whole of the earth into existence and then just let everything else evolve. There's that theory that circles around, which I don't know. I mean, I don't know whether or not to think that's cooler than the traditional creation story, or just lazy on God's part. I'm not sure.
I don't know how it could be lazy. I mean, I certainly can't create an earth
But
by any means.
How about I just make a big ball and then let's see what else happens?
Well, I would imagine he had the idea of putting the life there that was going to evolve into it. Not that I believe that necessarily, but yeah, I don't have an issue with it necessarily either.
I don't think you believe in anything, Dan. I'm becoming convinced.
I believe that Rogue One is a terrible movie. All right, moving on. Jack, how about you? Thoughts?
Yeah, I guess.
I'm on my phone.
What?
You were on your phone.
Oh, well, if I'm looking at you guys looking at my phone, it's the same thing to the podcasters.
Exactly.
So I guess the main thing, at least where I'm at right now, is all of it. What I want to drive home when I'm having conversations with people about the creation of the earth is it's such a divisive conversation oftentimes.
Yeah.
And I think that the way that we respond to that is much more important than necessarily trying to figure out specifically scientifically what the educational approach is. That's obviously a huge can of worms that we could go off for 3 hours, just arguing what I just said there. But we're going to skip over that because my main point is that I'm not Mr. Science. I really enjoy the idea of hearing theories and understanding things, being able to prove things biblically through science, or being able to look at things at science, but think I need to pick my battles, and I know that someone's going to come at this from either angle and totally school me. It doesn't matter.
Yeah.
So what I want to show people is that I'm willing to listen to them.
Mm-hmm.
Be like, cool, yeah, you know what? I don't know the answer specifically. I have some ideas, and I've heard most of the angles, at least loosely. So I think I'm just tired of, since I grew up so conservative, you had to have an answer for every last thing, even if you don't actually understand it. But gosh darn it, you had to be able to, have an answer. I know that in the Bible it talks about, having a ready answer for someone who asks a question. I think that more importantly is about, why you have the faith that you have and being able to share the gospel and the good news. Right. So I just think, I don't know. I feel like it's a distraction half the time when people are starting to argue over science says this. Well, God says this. Well, the Bible says this. I'd rather be yeah, you know what? I don't have all the answers, but I'd like to still be your friend and actually have real, honest conversations with you.
You're probably right. No, let's talk about it. Chill out.
Yeah, I guess if let's say it was from, let's say all of creation was this really long, drawn-out process. I do think that humans were created separately. I think we were created in the image of God. So even if there was some kind of an evolution of the creation taking a really, really long time, I still think there was a distinct moment when God created humans. And I have no idea what that actually looks like. So I guess maybe, because when I do have some conversations, people are, talking about how everything evolved into us as humans. And I think it's necessary to at least, talk about how there's a distinction in creation between animals and us for sure. Mm-hmm. Where that actually comes out in the science conversation, I don't know. So I don't really try and seek these conversations out personally.
What are you doing?
And
here?
I have friends. I didn't know we were going to be talking about this. Yeah, so I guess maybe that's kind of where I would, want people to. That's where I want to focus, at least right now. And maybe I'm being disobedient with, how versed I should be in the creation story. But
so basically, what you're saying is, if somebody asks you, "Do you believe in the Big Bang?" Your response is a very long and drawn out. Who cares?
yeah. Like, can we just? Yeah, really, honestly.
Yeah.
My problem isn't like I don't care that the Big Bang is like that people. I don't care that people believe in the Big Bang. If there are people who believe in the Big Bang, fine. I don't care that it's a theory that circles around. The problem is that a lot of schools don't treat it like a theory. They basically spoon feed it to students as fact. That's the thing that I dislike.
Karen, you were trying to chime in there. We couldn't hear you, but try it again. We've got no audio from you.
Sorry, I didn't
Your
know.
room is on fire, Dan.
I didn't know I had turned my mic off. Sorry.
It's all right.
I was just going to say that first answer was 100% perfect for me.
Awesome.
Cool.
Hey, Curtis, not to, put labels on you or anything, but you have said in previous episodes that you are not a believer in God or creator, correct?
No.
Okay. What's kind of your take on that subject? Do you think that the Big Bang is the most logical origin of the species, or do you have any other ideas?
When it comes to the Big Bang, I'm really not certain, because what was there before the Big Bang? And then, of course, the creation afterwards, we know, is the galaxies spreading out, suns being formed, and black holes, and all the other good spatial junk. But How did it happen to begin with? I mean, if there was a concept of a creator, that could explain quite a bit. Mm-hmm. But at the same time, I can't get the picture of I Dream of Jeannie out of me.
It's all right. I love your soothing radio DJ voice. So feel free to chime in whenever you want. Ben, give us some thoughts.
Well, trying to decide what's worth getting into with it, because I could probably talk for 2 hours on this, but this was one of the biggest things for me, because me being used to be a pretty hard atheist, and then now being a Christian, obviously the entire evolutionary thought and creation, Big Bang theory, time of day, Genesis creation, all this stuff is all pretty fundamental for me as kind of an analytical science fan of sorts, I guess. So, all that being said, I believe that the Bible is true first, and if the Bible doesn't seem right, it's because we don't understand it. And for me, there's a lot of times where we get really sucked into the schools of thought on everything, and instead of looking categorically or open-minded, such as like how Karen and Jake would say it, of just like, I don't have to understand, I don't necessarily have to know, it kind of starts breaking down walls of preconceptions that we may not realize were there. And in the sense for me of one day, it just kind of struck me, because when I first was a Christian, I was being schooled in kind of the Southern Baptist thought of the really hard 24-hour period, 6-day creation.
Yeah.
And I couldn't find any evidence of that. And nothing that really, so it's like, okay, yeah, the Bible says this if I think of it this way, but the rest of the world tells me that doesn't add up. And so it makes me sniff again that preconception,
Mm-hmm.
just and once I started kind of looking at it, I thought to myself, when God just randomly expressed himself and said, "Let there be light," I can't help but feel like that was probably a pretty big bang.
Mm-hmm.
There would have been a lot of energy. There would have been a lot of motion. There would have been a lot of things happening.
Sure.
And
Curtis, what's going on over there?
I actually remember watching it was a Stephen Hawking show about a lot of the cosmological things, and they had a really amazing set of animations about what they kind of suspected the early universe to look like. And they had this deep space of just blackness, and they showed how they suspected all these hydrogen clouds coming to life, and it was honestly so awesome to watch that I'm like, that's pretty beautiful. It's like we're trying to kind of downplay the feasibility of something like a Big Bang or a different type of progression from what we assume is the case. But when I saw that, I was like, that is one of the coolest things I've ever seen. And I don't really care how anybody wants to believe it, because I don't think it's pinnacle towards anyone's salvation or their ministry or their place. But truthfully, I believe in a lot of what the Big Bang has to say because of how I think God teaches us about it. And I guess for me, most of the times I see somebody combating the Big Bang would be when they are trying to go entirely young Earth creation, and I cannot stand behind that biblically at all, for a couple different reasons. One, scientifically, we know that time is relative. That's been proven multiple times over. Einstein came up with it in the early 1900s, and we have proven that to be true. And so basically, when we're not on this planet spinning at 24 hours a day, the concept of time becomes kind of moot, for one. Before the Earth is actually in position and moving in that amount of time, it's indiscriminate. And so we might be able to take our watches now and look into space with every consistent scientific principle that we know. We can look into deep space and see that it's anywhere from 14.5 to 15 billion years old. But what does that mean categorically, considering the Earth, according to this concept, has only been around for about a third of that time? Mm-hmm. Again, it's nearly an aimless number. That's us applying our concept of time backwards to something we weren't around for. And so to hold to that. But the biggest issue for me is the fact that God said he put the stars and the heavens in place. And I wish I should try to find the exact scriptures, because they're not coming to my mind at the moment.
It's all good. We don't expect cited sources here.
Well, whatever. But God says he put these things in place, and he actually said, I have a calendar that I'm going to be doing all this stuff by, and all of his festivals, everything that he considered important, he put on specific times, and a lot of his fulfillments of prophecy happened on those dates. And he said, I want you to look at, I put this stuff in place for you to keep time. Mm-hmm. I did this for you. So to assert the notion that God did this accelerated creation, that he made a universe that looks older than it is, means that so he gave us a scale that's wrong and told us to follow it.
Right.
That would be an issue. And so when we look at things...
Borderline deceptive.
Yeah, right. It's actually kind of saying that God's a liar, a little bit.
If we're understanding that correctly.
Follow this.
Right.
Follow the signs in the sky. Follow your year. Follow the cosmology of this as a calendar and mark that time. This is what I use. This is how I'm going to be moving. But the scale that he gave us is wrong, So that's a huge hiccup for me. It's probably the biggest one because it is so scripturally based. Mm-hmm. The rest being scientific, being something that changes over time and is reinvented, or not necessarily reinvented. That makes it sound like it's so baseless. But the science behind, our cosmology is some of the most tried and true science that we have. And so I like to hang my hat on a lot of that, because I really don't see how it contradicts Scripture.
Sure.
And I am perfectly willing to surrender any of my ideologies should other scriptural evidence push me that direction.
Yeah.
So that's kind of the quickest version, I guess, that I could put out my convoluted thought pattern.
Well,
The award of best rant in church goes to.
Hey, at least he kept it on topic for us. Ben, I'm curious, with the whole idea, like the old Earth theory, does that insist on evolution, or does that include also the possibility of Adam and Eve and all that stuff being literal?
Well,
from your view.
From what I can see, and again, coming from the perspective of Scripture being our first, that kind of has to be how we base it, and we need to understand that our understanding of it is very focused and quite narrow at times. But there are a lot of mechanics of evolution that we've been able to witness even in our short time.
Mm-hmm.
We see all sorts of viruses. I mean, the CDC watches evolution happen on a consistent basis. But the assertion would be that at some point those mechanics can actually change the type of organism to another.
Yeah.
And we haven't seen categorical evidence of that as far as anything that I've seen. But I believe that I kind of hold to a loose idea that I think there's been a lot of changes happening in life on Earth through that time. But the Bible is extremely specific about the fact that God created people in a completely different way. And so I don't even really have an issue. If somebody wanted to hold to the evolutionary, pattern that's laid out in modern, biological textbooks, whatever, I wouldn't even really have a whole lot of issue. I don't necessarily see the mechanics of it, but nothing else. God actually specifically said that he took the dirt and he did something special with it. He actually breathed into it, which to me, in thinking the way that Genesis reads somewhat in poeticism, Genesis, there's a whole other debate about people want to make it historical. People want to say it's poetic. Either way, I don't think it was written to be an exact history. But either way, God writes it out that he spoke, and here's the universe, and he breathed life into man. There's almost this kind of parallelism for me. But it shows that there was a really specific, intentional creation that happened in his image. And so I don't believe that humans are a product of evolution. I could see other parts of the world, other life forms, having evidence of certain capacities of the mechanics of evolution, but there's just way too much. There's too many loose ends from me to believe in macro evolution, which would be the changing of entire species.
Right.
The Darwinians thought of the refining of a species or the survival of the fittest is fine, because when you talk about a genetically variable species, such as on the Galapagos Islands, all these birds that have all these different shapes of beaks that are so perfectly, fit for what they're supposed to be eating and their survival and everything. When you're talking about early species that have a lot of genetic variability, you have a lot of things like survival of the fittest happening, and you simply have a filtering down of species occurring. You don't have them changing, but you have the variability coming into focus. And so I don't see it, but I want to hold to the fact that humans, we are not a product of evolution, and we are not just the next step up from the Homo, whatever that you want to call it.
Cool.
I think that's Homo sapiens.
That would be us.
Yeah. Yeah. Yep.
We are not a step up from us.
Right.
No,
If anything,
are you making a joke?
Yeah, well, yeah.
I think I caught it.
Homo
The
erectus.
Just ignore I said anything. I was doing like 3 or 4 different things at once.
Oh, one thing that I was thinking about was how reflective it is. I missed the past like 5 minutes. I was on a phone call. But, earlier you were
I wasn't
talking
listening. Now
about-
I'm going to talk.
I'm sorry, I bored you.
No. It was work. Anyways, one of the things you had said, you were talking about kind of the hiccup. And I think that is just so reflective of just kind of, I don't know, how the childhood of conservatism, especially, like you were saying, Southern Baptist, just kind of is. Like you were talking about how like God set this super elaborate kind of like hoax up is what a lot of people are actually believing. And I just think that's funny because basically what we're saying with that, if we believe that, is
Good night.
Good night, Hayden.
what we're
Sometimes
thinking
children interrupt church. It happens pretty much every episode, so get used to it.
kind of this like do it because I told you to kind of a thing. And I think that is so reflective of parenting of super conservative people. And I think that like there's so many things in scriptures that we don't know how to break down, but we have to have an answer for.
Yeah.
And that has kind of come out through our families growing up, I think, and just kind of seeing it in the church, especially on the conservative end of like, you just do it because you're supposed to, because God said to, and we can't ask why,
Right. The whole God said it, I believe it, that settles it, assumes that we know what God was saying.
Right.
Yeah.
So, yeah, if he did say it, I believe it, but I'm not convinced about a lot of things that you say God said.
I think something that's kind of resonating that I've had a thought with, that just on a really easy side of the whole 6-day creation. Like if somebody wanted to assert themselves for the 24-hour period in Genesis, the first day includes 3/4 of the universe's history.
Right.
He talks about light, and he put heavens and the earth and all these things that when you look at, the Big Bang's theory, you're talking the first 10 to 12 billion years of the universe. And again, irrelevant time scale. So even if somebody wanted to say that those were, you're still looking at something that's moot until, again, the earth is kind of set in place. And so it's got to be older. It's got to be older than 10,000 years.
What, you say God can't do it?
I'm saying God isn't a liar.
If God can do anything, he can lie.
Yeah, he can command us to do things that we can't do.
Mm-hmm. Curtis, you want to chime in?
Go ahead.
Well, I guess when it comes to evolution, are you only looking for the macro evolution, or do you see micro in everyday life of humans? I mean, if you think about it, people 100 years ago, if you were to go back in time now to 100 years ago, the common cold you have now could be a catastrophic event and potentially wipe out 90% of civilization, compared to just evolution on a micro scale. What we can help defeat back then, people couldn't. And same thing with technological advancement is, I find in a way, its own evolution, as we're creating things and we are gaining rather large amounts of intelligence rather quickly.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think Ben did address that. Ben, you said that you do see micro as pretty apparent in everyday life, or at least in science.
If anyone looks, actually really looks at what's going on, exactly as Curtis is saying, microevolution is happening. Absolutely. The only issue that I've just never been able to reconcile are all of those little changes on cellular levels enough to be able to create an entire change on a macro scale for an entire family of creatures. I haven't been convinced
Mhm.
of that mechanic. So I absolutely do believe in microevolution. We see it. We fight it every year.
Mm.
We fight it every year with a new flu vaccine, and we just try to roll the dice and hope that we pick the right one.
Hey, you're on a
Yeah.
conspiracy podcast, so
So
choose your words wisely. I'm just kidding. Curtis, do you agree with him for the most part? Curtis, do you believe in macroevolution as well?
I do to a certain degree. I mean, we are seeing different species, whether they be insects in certain cases and amphibians in some cases, and including small-celled organisms like plankton that are, if I can speak, that are able to change in their environment. I mean, there's a species of plankton now that actually feeds off of plastic in the middle of the Pacific Ocean. And
Nice.
that in itself was never thought could happen.
Can't beat them, join them.
And I think there's a species of frog that has actually evolved recently. I want to say down somewhere in the Amazon where it's become very polluted, and now they can survive within that polluted region.
Would that be considered macro, though? Or would that would still be micro, right? They're just adapting to what they have to deal with. They're not actually changing their species.
Yeah, I think it would definitely be more of the micro, but it could lead to a macro, because if
Sure.
many micro evolutionary processes happen, that will lead to a macro.
In theory. I mean, I have no idea. Is there anything in science today that we have been able to perceive that has been a macro evolution, like from our perception outside of just theorizing about things over time?
Not really to my knowledge.
Yeah. Interesting.
no, and there you're getting into the geologic column of the mechanics of this taking millions of years.
Right.
You know,
Right.
we can't. We only know of us humans being around for a couple 10,000 years. You know,
Right.
if that, depending on who you're talking to. So every scientist would even answer that question just saying, "Well, no, you can't watch that. That takes too long." You know.
So Ben, do you think that humans were around for only 10,000 years and the rest of the time it was just this big Earth that was just hanging out, getting its act together while waiting for God to slap us on here? Or what are your thoughts?
If there's one thing that God has proven in my life, and pretty much everyone I know, is that He is a God of perfect timing.
Sure.
And reading, darn it, what is his name? Scientist, phenomenal guy, and I can't think of his name.
Albert Einstein.
9 o'clock at night.
Michio Kaku?
No,
Cacao.
I could actually go find the book quick. But he goes through all the statistics of, or the math behind all the characteristics of any universe having all the correct components to sustain single-celled life for less than 90 days, or stable single-celled life for over 90 days, multicellular life, and stable life as we know it. And he goes through all that, and it breaks down further and further into every little detail, from the universe down to a galaxy cluster, to a galaxy, to the solar system, to the planet, to the atmosphere, to everything. And it becomes so exponentially difficult to even fathom there's enough atoms in the universe to even find one that could represent the chance of what this is. It's something very, very intentional. And from how I have seen science and how I believe the creation to go, he has been working on, I mean, just the entire formation of the planet alone has everything to do with the fact of hydrogen burning down, creating heavier elements, and then being scattered, and that's how these planets are formed. And it takes time for everything else to develop. And I believe God is the same way that he can form us in the womb, the same way that any other systems happen on this earth. The earth itself was this creative process. And the life that was sustained on earth before us was something necessary to achieve this crown of creation. As insane as I think he is for being so fond of us, we were very special to him. And I think the dinosaurs, everything that happened leading up to us, it was all in preparation for what was to come, just as we are now needing to, he has specific purposes for us now to achieve a certain goal. I think we've only been on the earth probably that amount of time, and it just kind of depends on who you're looking at,
Sure.
as far as civilized language and anything that's really looking at all the cave writings and things of being able to try to gauge how long we've been around. You know, some people say it's 6,000 years, some will say 20, 30,000 years. But yeah, I kind of hold to that, and I really don't think we were trotting around with dinosaurs.
Okay.
And I don't think we had a baby brontosaurus on the ark either.
Well, to each his own. Anybody else want to weigh in? No?
I've got absolutely nothing, and this whole subject was my fault.
It's because you're taking your class on the Big Bang Theory tomorrow, so you're like, oh, I'll get back to you guys next week.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, what are we doing?
Wait, are we doing his homework for him right now?
You
Pretty
might
much.
be. Actually, what's interesting is I read the syllabus. I read the syllabus for the class, and one of the things that it listed as far as like what you have to address or what you may end up having to write a paper about is literally the origin of the universe. And I thought to myself, well, they're not going to accept a paper that just says God made it.
God did it.
It's going to have to be a little more complex than that. So I have no idea what to do with that.
This from the guy who said if man evolved from some sort of single-celled organism, that means God is lazy, and that's your answer to that question?
I told you to ignore that.
Anyway, we can shift gears, talk about something else before we're done here. Do you guys, anybody else have something else? If you guys don't have anything, I'll pitch out a topic, but, well, you guys have the floor if you have a thought, have a story, have anything. Somebody? Anybody? Kayla? It's your birthday tomorrow.
No, my technology isn't very good.
Talk about technology.
Yeah.
So,
It's still going to be your birthday tomorrow.
I'm just struggling with it.
It's all right. Okay, I'll pitch out a question. To all of the, 5 of you that believe in a creator, what would it take for you to not? And for you who doesn't, what would it take for you to? What evidence would you guys need to shift gears?
I think I'd have to die
Yeah?
and see it and come back. But even then, I don't know if I could trust my senses.
Do you think there's anything that could happen to you currently that could cause you to think, surely God is not a thing because of this?
Same answer.
Well, yeah. About the brutal death of your children and everyone you know and love.
Oh, that stuff? No.
You know, like Lot. Not.
That's
Yeah.
been, I was going to say,
Job?
that's been done a bunch. Job.
Mm-hmm.
That story's
I mean-
already written, Dan. Come on.
Yeah, I
I'm
know.
not above
I don't
just
know.
killing myself at that point, but
It's true.
I don't think that would make me stop believing in a creator. There's just no way that this all happened by chance,
Sure. Okay. Anybody else?
which is good enough for me.
I mean, I know that I've been like seeking out God for, actively for, years. I grew up in the church, and I, became, a more deeper personal relationship for myself when I was like, 12, 13. So, 10 plus years. So it's like, it's hard to answer, with a good answer, just, because of the fact that that's what I've been seeking. I was like constantly like adding to the proof of why I believe that God exists. So, which, I mean, it is, I guess, a testimony in and of itself. But yeah, I mean, especially recently, it's just been so evident to me that God's not that just he exists, but that he's been, doing things in my life. Just it can be little things. I'll start thinking about a topic or something about God, and then someone else will bring something up, and then I'll read something else in Scripture. I'll have a conversation with somebody, and then later at night or the next day or whatever, I'll hear a sermon or whatever, and it's like I was literally just having conversations about all these things, and just so much affirmation for me. And granted, of course, I am earnestly seeking it out myself. So
Sure.
I'm not just kind of like waiting for all of the proof to come to me. So I guess it's just hard for me to answer that question.
Yeah, it is a tough one. I don't even know if I have an answer for it. So do you think that, if I'm understanding you correctly, like coincidences and stuff just popping up, do you think that those are signs of a creator, like things that you were struggling with popping up in your life or topics or whatever? Is that kind of what you're saying?
Kind of like, yeah, I don't know. I mean, some of it's problem solving stuff. Like I have a need and all of a sudden, that need is met or whatever. I could give you, a bunch of examples of how I think that, it specifically was God, like acting in a situation, but even just kind of like seeing how conversations will, like throughout a day, like even yesterday, just like, because I work Sunday morning, but I knew some people who went to a church and they were catching a few different things that, the pastor was saying through the sermon. And I was like, oh yeah, that's actually been on my mind recently, and just kind of expounding on that. And then having conversations later in the day that are totally related to what I was talking about early in the morning in a completely different setting, completely different group of people, crossing between that, these people don't know each other at all. Yeah. So, yeah.
That could just be the Matrix, though.
That's what I was going to say.
Sure, you're right.
Still a creator.
Right, yeah.
We could do a 2-hour episode of The Matrix on this.
We could, and we will. So, yeah. Anybody else?
Well, I guess for me, I'd have to go along with what Kayla was saying, is I'd literally have to die and be standing in front of the pearly gates in St. Peter and like, oh, okay, I guess everything I thought wasn't true.
Sure. So there's nothing that could, or at least you feel like there's nothing that could happen in your life that would make you think, maybe somebody made this.
Not really. I mean, I do believe in evolution, and I mean, there's just so much beauty in the universe to think that it was just all of a sudden popped into existence by one individual or one being. And that's not saying it wasn't. I mean, we could go into the whole holographic universe idea.
Yeah. Thank you, Kayla. Yeah.
Personal favorite.
I love Penn Jillette. He's a hardcore atheist, and he talks about atheism in such a beautiful way, not like, we're here and we don't matter type thing. He's like, this is beautiful. This is perfect. This is what it's supposed to be, and be happy with that type of thing. So, yeah, I can see both sides of the coin on that, where it's like, because of all this beauty, I know that there must be a creator, or what you're saying, because of all this beauty, I mean, we don't necessarily have to attribute it to anything. It's just the amazingness of the universe. But yeah, interesting take. Somebody else? Forrest, Karen, Ben? Forrest, go ahead. Somebody.
Oh, okay.
Somebody, fill the dead air.
What are we talking about?
All right. Ben, take it away.
Let's talk about what we're talking about.
Thinking, I've been kicking around. Probably the first thing that came to mind that would be something that would really shake me up, that would kind of shake some of the fundamental things for me, would be like an alien invasion.
Right.
That'd be like, whoa, what the heck is going on?
Raises some questions.
But I guess the kind of thing for me that comes to mind with that is, one, it's mathematically impossible that our Earth would be here to sustain our life, much less another planet. The life of our Earth is about as young as it can be to be in the condition it's in to sustain our life. So virtually, there's pretty much no other planet in the universe that's going to be old enough for life to have advanced to the point of interstellar travel.
Don't talk too much about aliens, because
issues with that.
we can go there, but I want to give everybody else a chance. And I would love to go there.
I can keep it on topic. So, but the point for me would be the fact that Revelation talks about how God's going to basically send the angels to start desecrating this place.
Tearing shit up.
And a lot of it's be coming from the heavens, and it's probably going to look a lot like an alien war, you know?
Right.
So even that would kind of make me less concerned. It would be really hard. I think it would pretty much be impossible, because I have come to so many points in my faith where I feel like my fundamentals have been shaken. And I've realized it's a matter of conceptual emphasis or a matter of definition of whatever theology that I happen to be struggling with, whatever ethical problem, whatever morality it might be. God has the answer. I might have been looking at it the whole time, but I've been overemphasizing a certain term. I've been overemphasizing a certain concept. I've been too lax on it. My definition of something was wrong. And when that comes in line, so many more things become clear. And so I don't, like Kayla was saying, I don't trust my perceptions. I don't even trust my feelings. I don't trust the way that I understand this stuff.
Right.
The more I dig, and I'm glad I do. I'm glad God has given me a little bit of that hunger to dig and to try to work through those things, because there have been times I've looked at God and said, I don't know if I can believe you. If this is true, I don't know if I can believe you.
Right.
And luckily God's big enough that he's like, I don't, whatever.
Tough shit, I'm here, whether you like it or not.
Yeah. And I just realized that, actually Karen, this past year kind of sobered me up a little bit, because she said the kind of thing that Jake said earlier, because I've always been so ravenously stuck on just wanting to understand and wanting to know that I asked her a question. She's like, I don't know, and I don't really need to know that. And I was like, yeah, you're right. I don't have to understand everything. And the biggest thing for me, and I think for me that was a really sobering and honestly a very disappointing time for me, because one side of the coin, there's an intellectual struggle, and somebody should be humble enough to be able to rethink and re-examine how they think of that stuff. And it should, if they see evidence, they should be able to change exactly what they think about it.
Yeah.
But on a personal level, breaking away from the intellectual, talking on a personal level of the experience and the relationship that I have with God, it's really pretty appalling to think that I would be so upset about an intellectual crisis that I would have that I want to walk away from God and not believe in it anymore.
Yeah.
It's actually treasonous, and I was very disappointed in myself to think that would be the case. And I'm growing from that to where, answering your question, I don't know that there would be, because I would just have to call myself a liar, ignorant, stupid. Obviously, I don't understand what's going on in front of me.
Right. And
And
for the most part, agree, and I agree on the positive and the negative side. Like, the whole, I don't know what I'm perceiving most of the time. Like, I'm not that smart, so I could easily, not easily, but I don't know that there is a thing that could make me not believe in God. It might just be because of my upbringing. It might be because there's a God. I don't know. But the idea of what it would take for me to not, I don't rule out the idea that I am so smart that I couldn't be convinced otherwise. Because, I mean, for the same reason that I don't know that I could be, I don't know. I think it kind of goes both ways. I'm not smart, so, I could probably be convinced. I can't perceive what the reason is for that, but I'm not ruling it out, which is, I don't know, it's interesting. Nathan, welcome to the conversation.
You just joined. You have no idea what we're talking about. What's your take?
I neither agree nor disagree.
Ah, dang. That's
Karen,
a perfect answer.
Karen, your name was
Yes.
mentioned in that last comment, so I'll give you a chance to respond, as though
Okay.
this is a political debate.
Oh, thank you, God, that it's not a political debate. Okay. Yeah, I really appreciated, Ben, your comments, by the way. I am at the age and stage in my faith and my life that almost everything about my faith is kind of up for grabs. I keep coming across this term deconstruction. I feel like it's the conversation God and I are having right now, deconstruction, and basically taking every little piece and bit, like, what is my view of scripture and all, just a lot of things. And the theme is uncertainty on all of the particulars, the things that people would argue about. And at the same time, so I'm less and less and less certain, okay? But in the big picture, I am ever and increasingly more certain that God is, and that God is good, and that God is like having a conversation with me. So I don't speak well. I write better. If you gave me 2 or 3 days to write about this, I might have some great thing to say. I know Kayla appreciates this. Yes.
Agreed.
That's what Ben likes about
my short answer is, the particulars, I have so much doubt and uncertainty and don't even know what I think about almost anything, except that in the, the big picture, God is good, and God is right here with me.
Absolutely. I like that you brought up the deconstruction thing, because that word is being used a lot lately. And
Yep, it's everywhere.
Yes, it is. And I think it's an important thing. I think that the name itself, though, has kind of negative connotations for people who are comfortable in their faith. I'm, of course, I'm all for it, and that's what this podcast is all about. But for me, and I heard this on a podcast recently, they were like, it's not really deconstruction, it's construction. We don't know. We never did know. We're building it. We're not taking it apart or, nitpicking everything. We're trying to figure out what it is and build that. So, in examining what you believe, it's not necessarily tearing it down and starting over like I think the title kind of implies. It's just knowing what you believe instead of just believing it for the sake of believing it.
Well, yeah, you're sorting out like what is versus what did people tell me, so it's what I think.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I certainly don't disagree with the concept by any stretch.
I almost see it like a cleaning of house of sorts, where you've been bringing in furniture and all sorts of knickknacks and things into your house, and they were covered in bubble wrap or dirt or mud or whatever, and I kind of left them there for a while, and then he's like, we're going to go through and we're going to
push it all out the door and bring back in what we need.
we're going to clean this up. And it's like, I've had that this whole time. It didn't look anything like that. I had no idea what this was the whole time.
Sure.
Well, there's a quote that I've heard I've heard from a few sources, and I just love it. It's that God doesn't steer parked cars. And I think that's what's great about that too, is you can take parts out of a car and, start over with, in a sense, as needed. Like, if we don't address this now, we're going to have a serious problem with rain getting in, or,
if you don't drain the oil out and put new oil in, it's gonna crap out on you.
Yeah. So, there's definitely a renewal process. We talk about how in the scriptures it says that we need our minds to be renewed. I don't think that that's just first at salvation or whatever. I think it's a continual process. Whatever the method may be, prayer, reading, being challenged by other people. So, yeah. So, I guess in that perspective, with the conversation of the Big Bang or creation or whatever, I don't so much want to approach it as if I don't know, don't care, don't talk about it, as much as right now I don't know. I'd like to have a conversation with someone about it. So my goal isn't just to be we are never talking about creation, because I don't know the answer and I don't want to know, so if someone, is fired up about it and super passionate about it and they disagree with me, maybe that would be a great opportunity to, work on them with work on something with them instead of like I don't want to give anyone like a cold shoulder,
Right. So Nathan and Forrest still have yet to answer this question. If you want to, you don't have to. Forrest, have you figured out what the question is yet that I asked a half an hour ago?
Not really.
All right. Well, the question.
Like, I'm trying so hard.
No, you're not. I saw you texting a minute ago after you gave Jack crap for texting.
On this lighthearted note, I actually got a call. I'm gonna have to get to bed.
Oh, good. Well, thanks for coming on, man.
Okay.
Good to
Appreciate
see
it.
you.
Coming.
Bye, Ben.
Good to see all of you.
Peace out.
I mean, I heard stuff about deconstruction of God and something about the end of the world or
All
something.
right. You're way off. Nathan, to you and Forrest. Nathan, because you just got here, and Forrest, because you apparently just got here.
I have an excuse. He just likes Rogue One.
The question is not about Rogue One. The question was, I know that you both are believers in a creator. Is there something that could happen to you or something? What would it take in this life to make you believe otherwise?
Oh, at this point, I think nothing. Although I'm really open-minded,
Oh, now I understand the question.
Yeah, because I just said it. Good
it
job.
makes so much more sense now that I was listening.
Yep.
Yeah.
I could totally answer this question after Nathan's done. But Nathan, please give your much more thorough and intelligent, educated answer.
Forrest is just going to be like,
Okay,
no, there's
sounds
nothing.
good.
Leave me alone. Let me get back to my text.
Easy act to follow. Yeah.
Oh, I'm done with that, actually.
Yeah, I guess like it was really odd and uncomfortable for me to say because I'm so open-minded and like you know how I am. Like I take every piece of evidence, and no matter what position I hold, like if something proves me wrong, I'm happy just to know something more. So it's weird for me to say, but I honestly think at this point there really wouldn't be something that could make me believe otherwise. Mm-hmm. And it's not based on like subjective experience of like, oh, well, I just really felt God in this moment, and I prayed this and it happened, and you just can't blame that. Like,
I haven't felt the touchy-feelies in a while, so he must be gone.
Yeah. Like, I think that stuff is, I'm not downplaying like the importance of it, but for me, it doesn't really hold as much weight. And I guess for me, like, it really does come down to, and it sounds stupid to some people, but I think that's kind of the point, is it is kind of stupid, but like it really at this point comes down to it's the logical answer, and it would take a whole lot of evidence that I have not seen to persuade me otherwise.
Yeah.
So I guess that's just where I'm at with it, and I understand a lot of people think, well, that's foolish, there's no evidence, and the logical choice would be to believe there's nothing. Right. But I guess, I don't know, from my perspective, of questioning it for a long time, and eventually coming to this point, I really think it'd be hard for me to ignore all of that.
Sure. Yeah, I pretty much agree, and I said something similar, but not as well worded, so thank you. Ditto.
I can finally answer the question.
Nobody cares.
Rogue One,
Go ahead, Forrest, and welcome to the conversation.
Well, it personally for me, it took me a long time to believe that Rogue One was a good movie, and so
that's a lie.
Forrest is the first person I've ever removed from the group.
Oh my gosh, I thought he just got like disconnected.
I'll add him back in. I'm not that mean. I brought up Rogue One more this time than he has. Forrest, we must have lost you there. I don't know what happened.
I hate you so much. I was actually beginning to answer it seriously.
Baby.
Well, it only took you 45 minutes to get to a serious answer. It took you a half hour to realize what the question was. So.
I can't wait to listen to this part of the episode where all you hear is just laughter.
Yes.
For 5 minutes. right.
So if you have an answer that will keep you in the group, feel free to give it now.
Karen cannot stop. No, like for me, whenever I've had kind of really questioned or struggled with, when it came to my beliefs in God, it wasn't about whether or not there was a God to begin with. You couldn't convince me otherwise that there wasn't. I just kind of went through a period of my life a little bit where I was like, but do I care? And so that was a struggle that I had. But for right now, as it stands, you really couldn't convince me otherwise that there is no God.
Sure.
Yeah, you really couldn't. And I'm not just saying that because I'm a pastor's son, therefore I'm ordained or something. But it's just kind of it's a part of me, Whether I even constructed it that way or not, it's a part of me. It's part of even a vast majority of the decisions I make are based on what would God do, or what does the Bible say about this and stuff like that. So I'm not at all the most consistent Bible reader out there, not by a long shot. But it's still something that is part of the core of who I am.
Gotcha. Now, quick follow-up question, because we should go here shortly. But so to all of you who believe in God, your answer was you probably couldn't convince me otherwise. To the guy who doesn't believe in God, and I wish we had more that didn't to make this a fair discussion. But I'm curious, does anybody here think that we're all just arrogant humans that are like, I know this, and I've known this forever, and I've seen the reasons why, and they're there, I promise, but I know it because I'm right?
It comes down to how do you act when you spend a really long time not even really acknowledging that God is there in the first place? You kind of end up acting a lot like a douchebag. For me, that was my... Well,
that's just because you're a douchebag, Forrest.
Dan is. I was just about to say Dan is anyway. Whether he's close or not.
I believe in God. That doesn't stop me.
The freaking conversation. But no, in my experience though, I would become just a legitimate douchebag, and I would wonder so much. Why am I struggling so much? Well, it's kind of because I have no moral basis to lean on, because I would walk away from it.
That's a big conversation topic that I had written down to talk about, actually. The whole morality with or without God, and does it exist without God? But we don't really have time for that. I would like to clarify, Forrest, do you think that Curtis is a douchebag for not believing in God?
No.
All right.
No, I'm sorry. If I may sound like all people who don't believe in God are douchebags, I'm not. I'm just saying other people may have their own moral basis that they can lean on. Mine has always been God's. I don't have a backup, so that's why I'm saying that I act the way I do when I'm away from God, because I don't have an alternative.
Sure, absolutely. And I would say that we could possibly save that to kick off next week's episode. The morality discussion. If you guys are interested, we can do that. And for you guys who are listening, if you're not interested, we're totally not going to talk about that. Does anybody have any final thoughts before we kick out of here?
I just wanted to point out, because Forrest was saying, he's not anointed because he's a pastor's son. I just wanted to point out that the first person in my whole life that ever said to me that they had questioned the existence of God was a pastor's kid.
Yeah.
It was my freshman year in high school. She was a pastor's daughter, and she talked to me about how she had been through this, valley of doubt, and had maybe questioned whether there was God. And I just remember being stunned and shocked.
Statistically, us PKs are the most doubtful.
Yeah. So to say I'm not anointed because I'm a pastor's kid, I'm like, my expectation is apparently pastor's kids are the ones who push this envelope. So,
right.
Yeah.
I would say my subjective experience would correlate with that. I think it has a lot to do with this feeling of living in a fishbowl, and also no matter whether you want to or not, people will put that figurehead up on a pedestal, and you see them as they are, and you see this disconnect, and you think, well, everybody's just a bunch of phonies, and they're not actually who they say they are, and they're not who they are on Sunday, and therefore, like, are they saying something that's true? And you're expected to withhold that kind of a thing in public, but you don't feel that way. So I think there's a lot of dissociative kind of, mentality going on.
I think there's also that.
I have a question. First, I'll ask my question, but go ahead and say your thing after. I'm just going to ask it real quick. So my grandkids, their dad is a pastor. So you pastors' kids should talk to me about what good things I can input into my grandkids, to help them through that process. Not to say they won't ever question, but just to be a good grandma to a pastor's kid.
Just tell them to chill out. It's not the big deal.
I think the best thing you could do from not a pastor's kid, but I think honestly the best thing you could do is to welcome their questioning and make them feel normal for questioning. Don't
being who you are, actually.
Yeah. Don't let them feel like they can't ask questions, because that's the thing that pushes people away is saying, like, you shouldn't think that, or you're wrong for thinking that.
That's the thing that is life. You have to ask questions.
Shortly after my dad planted the church, I felt that pressure, even though my parents weren't even given it in the first place. I felt that, like, the automatic pressure that one day I was basically going to have to, take up the mantle and be the lead pastor of the church. I knew I knew right when I thought that, I'm like, no, that's not going to happen. Spoiler warning, it's not going to happen. And then a couple months later, I'm like, let's close out in prayer. So,
yeah, my dad, his father was a pastor, and he always said, I will never be a pastor. Never, never, never. And then he was a pastor, and I always said, not a chance in hell. And here I am with the TSID church. Just kidding. It doesn't count. Curtis, do you have any final thoughts?
Other than this was an excellent time. I loved the conversation again, and I like the fact that everyone here isn't a super Bible thumper, and you're willing to question even things that are in the Bible and look at other people's reasonings and what they believe, and I thoroughly enjoy every one of these chats.
Absolutely.
Dan pays us well.
Yay!
Awesome. Love having you here, Curtis. Can we, real quick before we go, Nathan and Curtis, let's do a radio DJ voice off. Whoever can give the best send out for this episode.
So can I ask you a question, Curtis? Were you ever actually a radio DJ?
No, unfortunately not.
Okay, well then I win.
So I
Kayla
was, but
though.
I guess I don't count. Thanks.
Sorry, your husband's the one who made up the competition. Blame him.
It's just the soothing tones. Curtis, I mean, surely you've applied to NPR or something, right?
I can't even stand to listen to NPR nowadays.
Dan, if you want to make a really relaxing bonus episode, just have me and Curtis on, and we'll just chat.
I'll just sit here and listen, fall asleep. Yeah. So each of you give your best send off for the episode.
I don't know what happened, but I can neither endorse it nor disagree with it.
Are you even trying? That was terrible.
Yeah, sorry. Oh, you meant me and Curtis.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. You and Curtis give your best radio DJ voice send off.
I apologize. You've been listening to TSID Podcast. Tune in next time or be square. I don't know.
All right, Curtis.
What do you say?
School
stay
Curtis.
Weird or touch dogs inappropriately? I don't know. What's your catchphrase?
Why
That's
is
not
that
it.
what came to mind?
Okay. You can tell I listen a lot.
I disavow. All right. Curtis.
We'd like to thank you for listening to another TSID Church, and we will see you next time with Dan Smott and friends.
Curtis wins on content alone. Not to mention the fact that his voice is so much more soothing.
Oh, that's fine.
Well, regardless, Nathan, you're welcome back next time, as you're almost always here.
Yes.
And all of you, please come back and invite a friend, and we'll talk to you guys next time. Thank you for being here, and tell your baby to shut up. All right. I'll see you guys.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Good night.
Good night.
now.
This has been a Goulash Media production. goulashmedia.net.
This concludes our broadcast day. Click.